Hello, and welcome to Creating Effective Figures. In this video, we'll offer some design tips for effective figures. My name is Sunita Patterson, and I'm part of Editing Services in MD Anderson's Research Medical Library. What makes a figure effective? Primarily, it's clear and easily understood by the reader. So the first thing to think about in designing a figure is how to arrange the components in a clear and logical fashion. We recommend organizing visual elements from left to right and from top to bottom. For individuals who are used to reading in English, this is how the eye naturally travels, like reading through a page of text. Let's look at a couple of examples of how to design figures accordingly. This is a panel from a figure that shows a schematic overview of a proposed molecular pathway. The clear starting point is at the top left with a hematopoietic stem and progenitor cell, HSPC. Moving to the right, we zoom in on TLR3, or toll-like receptor 3, activation. Without going into the details of the process, we can see the arrows are leading us down and to the right, culminating in expression of surface beta-2 microglobulin, B2M, and a protective effect that's nicknamed Don't Eat Me. Overall, the arrangement of the components and the black lines and arrows guide the reader's eye in a logical fashion through the information in this figure. Here's the top part of a figure that shows two schematic diagrams on the left, as well as several other types of data. In the schematics, notice that the processes are naturally presented from left to right. The panels are also presented from left to right, with panel B next to panel A rather than beneath it. Here's another thing to think about when you're deciding how to arrange information. For graphs, keep in mind that it's conventional to place the independent variable on the x-axis and the dependent variable that was measured on the y-axis. For example, here's a simple line graph comparing annual incidence of 3 types of Staphylococcus aureus infections in infants discharged from the hospital, covering the period 1997 through 2012. The x-axis shows the independent variable, year of discharge. The y-axis shows the dependent variable that was measured, the incidence of infections per 10,000 infants. Our next tip for designing figures is to avoid clutter on your figures. What I mean by clutter is unnecessary elements that don't enhance understanding and that distract from the key information. This can take several forms. First, including too much detail in your figures can take the focus away from the most important information. For example, this figure is from a review article that summarizes the molecular pathways regulating extracellular adenosine. This figure is appropriate for the review article because the article has a broad scope. However, if you were writing a research article focused on only one of the mechanisms depicted here, this amount of detail would be too much. In that case, it would be better to show just the relevant portion of this figure. Distracting backgrounds can also clutter up a figure. Here, the background color and the grid lines draw the eye as much as the data do. There's no need for a shaded background here. And if grid lines are needed for clarity, it's better to use gray rather than black so that they're not as prominent as the data. Here's a cleaner version. Now, most of the ink in the figure is used for the data. Watch out for special effects that don't enhance clarity. They can constitute clutter as well. On this bar graph, the 3D effect detracts from the readability of the graph. Also, there's some ambiguity. For some of these bars, it's hard to tell what value is represented because it's not clear exactly where on the x-axis the bar lines up to. So here's a simple and clear version without the 3D effect. So keep in mind that every component and design element in your figure should serve a purpose in communicating information. Our next set of tips for effective figure design relates to use of color. Color can help to distinguish data, group data, or highlight data. But when you choose colors, keep a few things in mind. Black, red, and blue reproduce well. Yellow should be avoided because it doesn't show up well. And loud or very bright colors are considered informal, so should be avoided or used in small amounts. This example illustrates all of these points. Further, the color is unnecessary. All black or a single color would work here and would look more formal and less distracting. So keep use of color simple and purposeful. A little can go a long way. Another consideration regarding color is that some color combinations are hard to tell apart for colorblind readers. In particular, it's best to avoid using red and green in the same figure. As an example, if you can see red and green stains in the left image here, the right image shows how they look in a colorblind simulation. It's hard to tell the colors apart. Magenta and green are a better combination. These colors appear distinct to all readers. To check whether your figures will be clear, you can run them through the Coblis color blindness simulator at the URL that you see here. Here's an example of color done well. This is a waterfall plot with each bar representing one patient's tumor response to immunotherapy. The size of the bar represents the percentage change in tumor size from baseline. The colors represent the response group. This is an attractive and purposeful use of color. And in the article, the authors used the same color scheme for all the figures. So in each figure, orange represents progressive disease, blue represents stable disease, and so on. This brings me to my final tip for effective figure design. And it comes from our experience as editors. Aim for consistency across all of your figures. Here's some things to think about. If you have different groups or categories that will appear in multiple graphs, it will be easier for readers if you use a consistent order in each graph. And decide on colors, fonts, and data symbols up front and use them consistently in all of your figures. Also, make sure the data match between the figures, tables, main text, and abstract. Sometimes as we're editing, we'll see different numbers of patients shown in the figures versus the text, or a text description that seems different from the trend that's shown in the figure. Thank you for viewing this video on effective figure design. For further information about scientific writing and publishing, or to request editing or a consultation with an editor, check out these resources from the Research Medical Library.